Thrash rules! Welcome back to Ground Zero Salem. I'm Pat. Had myself a little snack. Don't have a beverage handy, which is unfortunate, but I'm just going to dive into this. So, 1991. Playing Street Cleaner right now by Godflesh. Came out in 89, apparently. I didn't hear it till 1991, which is the year I'm going to talk about now. Second half of 7th grade, going into 8th grade. A lot of interesting changes. On a personal level, the whole private school thing didn't pan out. I hated it. My parents pulled me out of there. Following year, I went back to the inner city school that I was going to before, or the junior high continuation, I guess. So that was a lot better. Kids were still dicks, but what are you gonna do? You know, that's people. Got into a lot more heavy stuff. The second half of 7th grade there. This is kind of old news, but in case you haven't seen my very first video, the top 20 records that got me into death metal, and there's another one I did on punk and hardcore too. I got into a bunch of the stuff that I'm about to mention here. What got me into death metal, the impetus, the spark, was an article about death metal in a magazine that I can't remember the title of. I know that it wasn't Metal Maniacs. I know that it certainly wasn't Metal Edge. It wasn't Sounds of Death. It might have been a one-off kind of thing. At any rate, it was a big write-up, expose on all this new death metal stuff coming out. It wasn't 100% accurate. For instance, they talked about Godflesh, and I realized Godflesh got mentioned along with death metal a lot. They were an earache band. They toured with earache bands. But they were, you know, really dark, heavy industrial, as you probably know, specifically on this record. And I got this that year. Didn't grab me for a long time. It was just a lot to wrap my head around, coming from being an AC/DC fanatic only, you know, months prior to that. However, it grew on me over the years. It's a great record. You know, you should know how important it is. Crushing, steamrolling stuff. The first time I heard that, right after I read that article, I picked up the Grind Crusher comp. And this has been discussed extensively on this channel as well, but I might as well throw it out there again. I own this on cassette, as I did most releases back then. Great stuff, you know, a lot of stuff you recognize if you're into death metal now, maybe some bands that you don't. You know, Morbid Angel, Bolt Thrower, Carcass, Entombed, Repulsion, Nocturnus, you know, another one. But then you had bands like Intense Degree and Sore Throat and Filthy Christians and all these bands that were kind of still coming out of the hardcore punk scene from Europe. At the time, Filthy Christians were Swedish. Most of the other bands were from the UK. You had like Naked City, you know, weird, noisy, grindy jazz, John Zorn. So it was a mixed bag. I remember having it on cassette, like I said, and there were so many songs, and you know, it was kind of hard to differentiate sometimes what songs were what, because my ears were just getting used to stuff that was that high volume, that detuned, that aggressive. You know, for instance, you got Morbid Angel, that's a pretty defined song, and then Repulsion followed by Carcass. And I feel like Repulsion and Carcass kind of bled together for me at that time, you know, just to give you an idea. Terrorizer, Dead Shall Rise was a big one on this for me. You know, I listened to that song over and over again, but it was years before I tracked down World Downfall, because it wasn't as easy to get music at that time for me. It was all chain stores. I didn't really get into mail ordering stuff much at all. I did a few years later, started ordering a few things through the mail, but I was never one of these send away, you know, money order kind of thing, kind of people back in the end of the tape trading days. So this was my starting point. A couple of the records that I picked up after hearing about this. Got Morbid Angel's Altars of Madness. Absolute death metal classic. You know it, you love it. This is a reissue, one of those FDR deals. It sounds great. Complex, maze-like riffing. Tormented maze-like riffing. Possessed death metal vocals that were a little bit more on the high end than what David Vincent would do later. Just incomprehensible riff styles, you know, as far as being off kilter. Nobody caught up to Trey for years after this. And I've shown this at least a couple of times, but you know what? You never get sick of looking at that gatefold art from Realm of Chaos by Bolt Thrower there. It was the riff from World Eater that fucking hooked me. It was just steamroller. Concrete factory dropping on your head. Shattering your cranium. There's that whole tie-in, the Games Workshop. This brilliant artwork. This is an earlier pressing. I think it's actually an original. If it's not, it's an early 2000s pressing. It's not a repress from that whole FDR thing that Earache did. I'll show you the center labels here while we're at it. Custom center labels. Chaos Cross Eye thing. Awesome. Excellent record. Excellent. So, I was getting into death metal, but I was still exploring thrash. You know, I was kind of getting into all this stuff simultaneously. You know, death metal was the hot, relatively new thing, but I was still checking out thrash bands, starting to get into hardcore. We'll get into all that. Mentioning Suicidal Tendencies. So after Lights, Camera, Revolution, I started digging back the discography a little bit. Timeline on when I actually got these two is kind of shaky. I might not have gotten them for a year or two. Maybe not till 92 or 93. I don't remember. It was over 25 years ago, so cut me some slack. But wasn't these copies either. You know, I had them both on cassette. But great stuff. Excellent thrash metal coming from this sort of surf skate kind of cultural background. And the whole suicidal gang thing was a huge influence. The whole bandanas and all that. You know, it was a big shift from Join the Army to this stuff. You know, they absorbed some of No Mercy, got a lot tighter, a lot more metal. Mike Muir kind of started developing his vocal style that he only explored a little bit on I Want More from the first record. You know, that kind of melancholy sort of singing style, you know, very smooth and kind of tough sounding, also very sensitive. Awesome shit. This is a gold stamped promo, it looks like. These records were a song, you know. I found them in Maine. Watcher, viewer Ben, what's up? I found them at Strange Maine for a couple of bucks. One band that was huge at the time, one of those like, doesn't quite hold up for me like it used to, but were a big deal on Headbangers Ball. Prong. This is Beg to Differ. I think this came out in 90. Very, very into Prong for a long time. I didn't know for the longest time that Ted Parsons, the drummer, was in the Swans early on. But sort of mechanical, bordering on maybe a little industrially kind of influenced thrash, for lack of a better term, heavy metal. Tommy Victor was the sound guy at CBGB's for years and years. Another little factoid for you. But yeah, kind of almost like had a weird like Killing Joke bent, like mixed with thrash, if you don't know already. But I listened to the crap out of this band, and the follow-up record, Prove You Wrong, quite a bit as a kid. Nowadays, I go to the first EP, Primitive Origins, more than anything else, because it's got a lot more like fast, almost kind of discharge stuff on it. This was a big one when it came out. Coma of Souls by Creator. I also got Out of the Dark into the Light. That was the first one I got. Like a fool, like a sucker fool, I did not pull it out of the stacks to show off, but that's okay. If you want to see what it looks like, watch my old videos. That death metal video, I show it off. I think I might have showed it off on another one. This came out on Epic and Noise. After, you know, Noise became bedfellows with the majors there. And great early 90s thrash. You know, I think compared to a lot of thrash that was coming out at the turn of the decade, it was still pretty ferocious. Definitely less complex and technical than what they were doing a little bit before. This in Extreme Aggression is a little bit more streamlined. Millie's vocals are still venomous as ever. Yeah, it's kind of a divisive one, sort of. Like, not as much as Renewal. But a lot of people are kind of like, hey, Coma of Souls, when they start to fall off. I mean, I will never look at it that way because of nostalgia, more than likely. I just love it. It's a great thrash record. It's one of my favorites. But Coma of Souls was big for me. So was Out of the Dark. And it was somewhere in there that I discovered the almighty Motorhead. If I can just pull out the CD here. 1916 came out in 91. Again, music video hooked me. There's a bunch of PVC-clad women prancing around. Lemmy wearing his shades, wearing a denim vest. The first lyrics out of his mouth are, "I make love to mountain lions, sleep on red-hot branding irons." And I remember thinking, that makes absolutely no sense, but that is the coolest thing I've ever heard, and it's because of the man delivering the lyrics. 1916, they were kind of starting to expand their sound a little bit, I think. You know, there's certain songs on this I didn't like, and I still really don't like. Going to Brazil being one of them. Angel City being another. I feel like, you know, Lemmy had been living in LA for a couple of years at that point, I think. And that sort of LA Sunset Strip thing kind of influenced maybe a bit of the music on it, and that's why. Because other than initially liking Poison for like 5 minutes when I was like 10 or 11, I never really cared for that stuff. So there's a little bit of that, but there's a wide range of influences on this. So you got the classic Motorhead blueprint with I'm So Bad Baby I Don't Care and Sing the Blues and Shut You Down. But then you have 1916, this tear-jerking ballad about the First World War. Nightmare of the Dreamtime, this creepy, like, the closest Motorhead's ever been to goth kind of tune. No Voices in the Sky, great diatribe against greed and shitty people. It's got kind of a punk chorus, and then you got Ramones, R-A-M-O-N-E-S. Little love letter to their buddies in the Ramones, which made me want to get into the Ramones, which I did a year or two later when I picked up Loco Live. I still like this, still listen to it. Not my favorite anymore. It was at the time. I also got Into Sepultura. They were covered in that article. All over it. They were like the darlings of it. Them and Obituary. This is the Dead Embryonic Cells cassette single. It's not a single because it has a proper case, but so it's Dead Embryonic Cells, the cover of Orgasmatron by Motorhead, and Troops of Doom, a re-recorded version of Troops of Doom from the first LP. Awesome. Try not to say awesome so much, you know. Talk about being hyperbolic, but it's an excellent recording. The first time I heard Dead Embryonic Cells, completely blew my mind. I followed suit with Getting a Rise, and I love that record, but still do. It's just a great thrash record. It's one that is constantly playing in my head. I don't really feel the need to revisit it often because it's been listened to so many times it's been ingrained. There's a handful of I have a pantheon of records like that I still own, but who knows when I'll actually spin them again because they're just in there, you know what I mean? But yeah, Dead Embryonic Cells. This was a great, you know, kind of easing you into death metal thing because the music's still more or less just frenzied thrash, but it's got the kind of gruffer vocals, you know. At the time, this was death metal to me. You know, it was a few years before I got into the heavier stuff. I'll get into that as we go along. Started getting into a little bit more hardcore and punk stuff. Picked this very same cassette up used at my local record store. This is the singles collection for GBH. The clay year is 81 to 84. And it was just awesome to me. Probably the very first like British punk, hardcore punk, I guess, record that I gotten into. I loved how insanely fast and driving it was, but still completely catchy. So many great songs. Womb with a View, Diplomatic Immunity is an awesome one. You could see the influence that they had on thrash, on bands like Exodus and stuff like that. I think I saw guys in Exodus wearing their shirts as well as guys in Metallica. And again, the whole t-shirt thing, getting into stuff. But great choruses. I mean, some of the songs on here, like Children at Dust, isn't even like a raging hardcore punk song. It's almost like a new wave post-punk kind of song. Not new wave, but definitely a post-punk kind of tune. City Baby, Attacked by Rats. Just relentless, tight, fast punk rock. First one for me. It's a big one. Oh, let's see, what else was I getting into around that time. This was the first Napalm Death I ever owned. This is the Death by Manipulation comp. A couple of EPs and stuff like that, odds and ends. Side 1 with Barney, side B with Lee Dorian. So it was a good intro to the band. I definitely couldn't figure out what the hell was going on with the Lee Dorian material for a very long time. Let's see, which song? Suffer the Children was a video I was very fond of, and At that point, Harmony Corruption was out, but I couldn't find it anywhere, so this is the one that I ended up with. And it's great. You know, my favorite, still Utopia Banished, but Death by Manipulation is a good intro to ND. And there were a couple of thrash bands that were still going. Well, there were a lot of thrash bands that were still going in 1990, but a few that were still kind of pushing the envelope. You know, not doing a death metal thing, but kind of expanding, involving other types of music. Sometimes that worked, sometimes it didn't. I think, you know, the whole funk thing was still going at that point. There was, like the aforementioned Scatterbrain, didn't hold up for me. A weird one was Wrathchild America. They, you know, they came almost kind of close to being that goofy funk thing, but not really. They had a lot of cool riffing, a lot of different styles of music they were incorporating. Oop, that was upside down. This is just a promo copy, obviously. I don't have... I'd love to have it on vinyl with the actual proper cover art, but there's a song on here called Prego, for example, that was pizza sauce or spaghetti sauce, and the tagline for Prego was "It's in there," and like that was their way of saying this is tons of different styles of music that we're doing thrash metal style. Some cool, like, slower, creepier songs like Gentleman Death, and there's a song about Hellraiser on here, What's Your Pleasure? Great song, it's got Hellraiser samples all over it. Real Metallica, James Hetfield-y kind of vocal delivery. Pretty cool record. I still like it. It doesn't, like, transcend time and space or any shit like that, but it's good. I was also really into Forced Entry. Kind of prongish in a way. I've been jamming this a ton lately in the car because I finally found my cassette. It's been in the deck for a while. Really great record. Band was from Seattle. Again, kind of Hetfield-y vocals. Kind of that stop-start mechanical kind of vibe that Prong had, but way more aggressive and technical. And there's a couple joke songs on here that are total SOD, you know, almost like Crumbsucker style. There's a song called Weird Dicks and a song called How We Spent Our Summer Vacation. I picked this up randomly, saw ads for it in Thrasher. One of those bands where I feel like the cover art didn't really match up with the music. The music's definitely different. The early Rest in Pieces stuff is aggressive, fast New York hardcore with members of Sick of It All and Straight Ahead. This album, they were trying to do something a little different. They got a bit more rockish. The vocals, courtesy of Arman Majdi, who plays drums in Sick of It All, are a lot more like sung, kind of nasally and odd. But they, after a while, they just started to work for me. So it's like still like aggressive New York hardcore lyrics about, like, you know, fuck drug dealers, like that kind of stuff. But there's just a little bit more rock and roll, a little bit metal, like early Iron Maiden, even like the Giano era, I feel like has a bit of an influence on that. Some great solos. It came out on RC. I think it came out in '89. So I listened to that a lot that year. Skyclad, Wayward Sons of Mother Earth, pagan thrash metal. Came out of Sabbath, the British one. That's a long ass J card. Cool, like Celtic knotwork on the logo there. Martin Welkier from Sabbath started this band after Sabbath kind of collapsed. He had a falling out with Andy Sneap. Just read about that in the Noise book. Good riffs, you know, a little less technical than Sabbath. Great thrash stuff. Good venomous kind of shouted vocals. Insightful lyrics. And a little bit of folk influence. And they went on to be a folk metal band. But on this, it's only one song. It has like the fiddle and tin whistle and that. Widdershins Jig. Alright, technical difficulties here. So, I was about to talk about more Motorhead. Get back into this. I picked up Orgasmatron. That summer of 91, I think. GWR and Profile. 86, I think, was the release date of this. Kind of weird sounding production. The guitars sound kind of weird. The vocals are... The reverb is kind of odd. Bill Laswell, who I think was a producer that had more to do with, like, industrial stuff, did this. I hear the name off, and I can't quite place what stuff he's worked on, but a lot of people don't like Orgasmatron for that reason. Again, maybe if nostalgia wasn't a factor, I'd feel the same way. But I love it. It's classic Motorhead. Some of the songs on here are some of the fastest stuff they've done. Mean Machine being one of those songs. Talk about ripping. Riding with the Driver being, like, one of the punkest Motorhead songs. punkest sounding Motorhead songs in my opinion. Some of my favorite lyrics: "Spit in the Devil's Eye," "Orgasmatron," the creepy, lurching, kind of slow, apocalyptic tune. One of their bests. I think Sepultura did it justice. It was cool to hear both around the same time. Sepultura really didn't change much, just kind of more harsh vocals. I also got into Iron Fist, the one they did after Ace of Spades. Didn't own Ace of Spades for a very long time. I like the album a lot, especially Speed Freak, Don't Let 'Em Grind You Down. It's pretty much all great hot tracks on here. I don't think there's a dud in the bunch, to be honest. Bang to Rights, great song. It's a British term, slang term, bang to rights. Like, it's kind of the same thing as dead to rights, as far as I understand. But little 13-year-old me thought it meant like bang your head to like human rights. Great insert with the helmets. Can't go wrong with that. This is a bronze pressing. I'm trying to remember where I got this. I got this in Austin, Texas, when I was down for one of those Chaos and Teos Fest ages ago. Get back in home. Got into Carnivore. I picked this up just because of how it looked. I had no idea who the members were or what it was, and it completely knocked my socks off. Talked about it recently when I was going through the collection. I don't really need to revisit too much, but it's, you know, awesome New York hardcore crossover stuff. Very bass-driven with that clanky metallic bass sound that Peter Steele kind of owned all by himself, all on his own. It's a classic. Carnivore's Retaliation, Sabbath Breakdowns meets AF, meets some other stuff, Venom, great. And that was the same year, 91, that summer. Maybe it was before the summer, I don't remember. Slow, Deep, and Hard came out. And the fast parts on this are very much like that last Carnivore record, but the slow, weird, experimental, and industrial, and dirgy, doomy parts, I mean, this is the only record they did that sounded like this. You know, everything, they streamlined their sound a lot after that, and kind of involved more of a goth influence. A lot of the clangy, slower parts are very Swans to me, but maybe that's just me. Beautiful green, kind of toxic looking vinyl there. It's a repress on Metal Blade, I think 2012 or 2013. Also got big into the Subhumans, this record, that year. I bought it on cassette, still have the cassette somewhere, sans the case and cover, but I still have it. I upgraded with this vinyl LP with this record a few years ago. Some of the best lyrics, best punk lyrics that I can think of out of anybody as far as being political or social. Dick Lucas had a lot of good things to say and a good sense of prose. A lot of piss and vinegar and venom, kind of aimed towards organized religion and society and all that fun stuff. Yep, very scrappy, fast, thick British accented vocals. Cool songwriting though, very mature songwriting for a band like this, and they threw in some little touches of ska and reggae here and there that kind of put them apart from a lot of bands from their scene. And I did get into the punk DRI, like I mentioned on the last one. This is Dealing With It. This came out on Metal Blade. Got the classic Metal Blade logos there. This is some of the fastest stuff I'd ever heard at that point. Kind of weird getting into Napalm Death and stuff like that around the same time. But it's still the impact of it really hit me. You know, it's the recording quality was raw. You know, not as raw as their first one, which I heard not that much longer after that. The Dirty Rotten LP that was originally an EP. But just the fact that they just sounded like kids. You know, it didn't sound like monsters like a lot of death metal bands. They sounded like a bunch of angry kids, and the speed of what they were playing was really impactful. Eric Brecht, hell of a drummer. Really the only metal component on this. There's some pretty cool like double bass on a bunch of the songs, all the songs being 30-40 seconds long. You know, they were obviously a massive influence on everything that went fast after that. Power violence and, you know, grind and all those genres that kind of splintered out of that family tree of early hardcore. And although there were some other hardcore bands that were playing fast at the time, Negative Approach, AF's first record's pretty speedy. This really kind of set the bar, you know, and like all of these, I listened to it into the ground. Probably most of these that have shown off, like the cassettes, if I still had them, would be worthless because they'd be unplayable. Somehow that Subhumans one plays okay still, but there's WoW and Flutter all over it. So yeah, sorry for the but something the video audio sync has been screwing up and going off with my my camera lately, which is frustrating. But what are you gonna do? Maybe it's time for a real digital camera or upgrade my phone because I haven't had one for a couple of years. But me talking about that isn't very interesting, so I'm gonna let you guys go. All right, take it easy. Have a good week. I'll probably be back tomorrow. Gonna get on that 2017 stuff soon. Talk about some of those records that I liked, and I got some other goodies for you. These guys in Ireland sent me some cool records. I'm gonna talk about those, so that should be fun. Stay tuned. You guys have a good one.